Logan the Layman Gamer here, um, back for Halloween, and today we're gonna play a different game in the Castlevania series, something a bit of a dark horse. It's called Castlevania Dracula X, also known as Castlevania Dracula Double X in Japan, because it's uh, kind of a remake, kind of a sequel to Castlevania Dracula X Rondo of Blood, although it has its own kind of distinct features. Namely, this one in particular, the graphics. This fire background is spectacular. I think this might have something to do with Mode 7. I'm not sure about the technical specifications here, but uh, Rondo of Blood came out on the PC Engine, or as we know it, as the Turbo Graphics in the West. But this game is not quite as ambitious as Rondo of Blood. It shares the same storyline, but a lot of the level design is different. It has its own unique art style. Um, it's more difficult in many ways, but nonetheless, it's still quite fun, and I feel like it's a good companion piece. If you've played Rondo of Blood and you like that, then play this. This is kind of like a second quest or DLC, if you'd like. Um, so a couple things that I wanted to talk about since last time I recorded, I had not yet seen Last Voyage of the Demeter, and um, I figure this time I will use this recording to talk a little bit about that, and then I also want to talk about a bunch of Nosferatu films that have come, or Nosferatu media recently that I'd like to share about. And then I have one other thing that of my own creation that I would like to share, and hopefully you guys will enjoy it. So starting off, Last Voyage of the Meter. So yeah, I finally got around to seeing it. I think maybe like a month or two after last Halloween, and uh, I liked it for the most part. Uh, I thought the marketing of the movie as being is telling, sort of the story, the lost, or not lost chapter, but elaborating on one particular chapter in the novel was a bit misleading because it's significantly different from what the book actually has. For one thing, you have one survivor in the story. Dracula is nothing. His depiction is nothing like Stoker's, and even the lore is not the same. Like the vampires here can still die by sunlight. That to me, that's any depiction of like any adaptation of Dracula. That's like the baseline right there. If uh, if they don't keep faithful to just that one particular thing, then you can tell right away. Okay, yes, this is not a faithful adaptation because this is something that is purely a cinematic invention. It is nowhere to be found in the book. He loses his powers during the day, but he cannot be destroyed by sunlight. Anyway, um, the the film kind of plays almost like a Victorian version of Alien. You got this monster on board, and he he's picking off the crew members one by one until there's a single survivor who's excuse me, stands up to him. And that's kind of cool. I mean, I think it's an interesting variation on that idea of a slasher, but this time with a vampire. Um, Dracula himself, basically, he looks like Nosferatu, but he's naked pretty much the whole movie for some reason. I'm not sure why they did that. Maybe to make him look a little bit more unusual or unlike a normal human being. Uh, with mixed success. Most of the time, he's like in a quasi bat form, and uh, I'm not so impressed with the Count in this film. He's okay. I think the thing I'm more impressed with, like the scariest part in the movie, isn't even with him. It's with one of his victims that becomes a vampire. He's going after a little boy uh, down in the ship, like in the I guess it would be the captain's cabin, and his eyes are all like glazed over, and he's like a zombie almost, and he wants to get to the kid, and he just keeps beating his head against the door to break it down. It's very disturbing. It's the scariest moment in the movie, which is to say that there's not really that many, but that scene's very effective. It's very creepy. Um, I think the performances are generally pretty good. Visually, it looks good. I just I don't like that. I don't like that it it should have just been a Nosferatu movie, not a Dracula movie. I think it would have been better if we just said, all right, let's take this moment from Nosferatu and expand upon it and make it its own movie. Because the vampire already looks like him. The boat scene in Nosferatu is pretty cool anyway. Um, it wouldn't hurt to expand on that. Um, the main protagonist is a doctor, and he's also a black man. And I'm kind of surprised that they didn't play on that a little bit more about him being sort of an outsider, and also not only that, but being somebody who would have been very uncommon at that time, not just because of his race, but also because he was somebody of he was a very well-educated person of that race, because it would have been very difficult for people in that time to get a quality education because they would have been looked at as third-class citizens, not even second-class citizens. But I think because the boat consists mostly of sort of outcasts who are just trying to get from point A to point B, they don't really dwell on it for too long. But it's a good performance. Um, Again, it goes against the book because he does survive to look for the count, and I'm assuming there was no intention of making a sequel to this movie because he follows Dracula to England with the intention of stopping him, but of course that's where the film ends, and the novel has no character like this person, so uh, it feels a little bit inconclusive. So yeah, that's my overall thought. So Last Voyage of the Demeter, I'd say 3 out of 5. I don't know. I usually don't like rating movies. I'll put it this way. So ignore the rating. It's worth watching at least once. It's kind of a fun Halloween film. Definitely check it out. Um, okay, and then we have, is it Robert Eggers? I can't remember. I can never remember his first name. But the most recent remake of Nosferatu, another one that's fantastic. Remake that is, because the Werner Herzog film from 1979, really good, really cool, beautiful atmosphere, well shot. The score is ooh, so haunting. So this one's got a different vibe to it. It seems to lean more towards kind of an authentic Eastern European vibe as far as the lore and the culture. Eggers did a really good job with sort of looking at like how people dressed, what their customs were, things like that. Even the lore, it deviates considerably from what we would understand from vampire fiction in the West, whether we're talking about literature or movies. And so, for example, Orlok, his design has been given kind of an overhaul. He is more, he's like a walking corpse. I mean, when you hear him breathe, it sounds like he's got fluid in his lungs, and uh, he's got these open sores. Uh, Everything just it just feels like he's rotting. Like he's just a corpse that's walking. Uh, like even with Max Schreck in 1922, you got this image of a darn it, of a man of a dead man walking, and it's great for the time. I think that this plays it up even further, and this also is closer to how vampires were depicted in the folklore of that area. Another thing too is that he attacks his victims by biting their chest, which was a more excuse me, darn it, a more common method of vampires attacking their prey, not the throat. The one thing that I would say uh, differs, and I don't know why Eggers didn't just, if he was going to go one way, he should have just went all the way, I think. The one cinematic convention that he stuck to was Orlok dies by sunlight, which is not a part of the vampire lore. That is a cinematic convention. That was invented by the original Nosferatu. No vampire stories ever had that in them. Certainly not the Dracula novel. But Skarsgård, I always forget which one it is. Is it Peter? I can't remember. Anyway, Skarsgård, you know his first name, I'm sure. Gives a really great performance, like that guttural accent. It's like kind of rolling his R's and feels very alien and very dangerous and commanding. It's a great role. He really buries himself in that character. He's a good actor. You know, he I feel like you know he can be kind of hit and miss in terms of the movies that he chooses, but I think that he does a good job in picking roles where he stretches himself and really immerses himself in the variations of character that he plays. Because like Pennywise is nothing like Orlok, which is nothing like his role in uh, what's that movie? John Wick. So he's a pretty versatile actor. I feel like I don't know if this is intentional, but I feel like he is trying to go in the same path as Gary Oldman, or just trying to be a chameleon, trying new things constantly, and I applaud him for it. Um, Lily Rose Depp, great as Ellen Hutter. Um, I think that the there's an interesting new theme kind of where she seems to be already like in his thrall from the time that she was a child in some way, that she had this taint of darkness when she was young, and ultimately her sacrifice is a rejection of that, and uh, that I think is kind of a welcome addition. uh, ah, Here I was hoping I'd be able to unlock the hidden route, but I guess we'll go this way. um, yeah, I think it does not undermine the story. In fact, I think it enhances it in some ways. Um, her purity is, she has the desire to be good despite this flirting with evil, um, and not like even realizing it, I guess, or maybe being just having that childlike ignorance of evil. Um, I think it works well. And then Nicholas Holt as Thomas Hutter, he's great. Um, I think he definitely gives it more interesting uh, characterization, like more depth, and his fear, how he depicts his fear and stuff of being, in Transylvania, I think is palpable, and that anxiety and that growing madness within him. Uh, it is surprising that he went from doing one kind of Dracula film, Renfield, and then doing this one. Tonally they're night and day. They're nothing like one another. But I'm curious as to what his agent said to him at the time when he was being offered this role. It's like, oh, you sure you want to do this? Two Draculas in a row? But yeah, there you go. Film looks beautiful. Excuse me. Let me get a drink of water. I think there aren't many movies that look as good as this. I think a lot of films today they lack a strong visual component to them, um, with some exceptions. I mean, I think Christopher Nolan's movies generally are shot really well, like with lighting and color. Um, uh, Denis Villeneuve, his films look great. Um, who's the other one? His name's escaping me right now. I can't even think of a movie. Oh, Edgar Wright. I think Edgar Wright's films look great. Like Baby Driver. My goodness, what a beautiful film. Um, but yeah, this movie, its visual style, if nothing else, I think that makes the film well worth watching. And then what came out at the same year was another adaptation of Nosferatu, a considerably lower budget version, which was ma basically intended to be like a shot-for-shot remake of Murnau's original 1922 movie. And uh, for that purpose, I think it's an interesting experiment in filmmaking. It's not a great movie, not by any stretch. I would say the only thing that makes it really worth watching is uh, Doug Jones as the Count. Now, if you don't know who Doug Jones is, well, you probably do. You just don't know him by name. But he does a lot of films with Guillermo del Toro. Usually plays creatures of some kind, like in Hellboy, he played Abe Sapien. Shape of Water, he played the Gill Man. He's been in Pan's Labyrinth. He played a couple creatures in that. He's been in Batman Returns as one of the circus clowns. I'm trying to think of what else. He's been a lot of stuff, but he's almost always under makeup. He's got very good physicality. Like his ability to pantomime is, uh, I don't know if there's anybody that's his equal today, but excellent actor. And his Orlok is fantastic. He really looks the part. He's got the traditional look with, the pointed ears, the balding head, the rat teeth, the long nails. He gets it down perfect. And I would say in that respect, he's probably more faithful to the original than Skarsgård. Uh, Skarsgård's, I don't necessarily like the changes that they made. I think that's one thing they should have just stuck with making him bald, not giving him a mustache, not giving him like a ponytail. I thought that was a little bit too much. Um, that movie, that one it relies almost, I think, exclusively on green screen set pieces. There's no location shooting. I don't even think that there are proper sets. Um, it's uh, it's a movie that's worth watching as a curio. Um, I guess the best thing I could compare it to, although this isn't entirely the same, is Gus Van Sant's remake of Psycho, where he did a for shot remake of that, and of course we all know how beloved that movie is. So um, yeah, I think th that one's worth seeing again just as an experiment of film. Excuse me, and for Doug Jones' performance because I think he deserves all the credit for making that film watchable, and I really liked his work in that movie. What are some other Nosferatu things that? So okay, so I've been recently for the Halloween season. I've been rewatching Are You Afraid of the Dark? Now, for those of you who are um, who grew up in the 90s, you probably remember this show. Are You Afraid of the Dark? For those who don't know, it was like an anthology horror series for children, and it centered around a group of kids. They were called the Midnight Society. They'd get together around a campfire, and each episode, one kid would tell a scary story, and they dabbled in all sorts of different genres. But there's one in particular that stands out to me that's relevant to our video here. Uh, The Tale of the Midnight Madness, and it's about a movie theater that's about to go under. Like they're really in dire straits financially. It's an old movie theater. Two people work there, and then there's also the manager, and they're making no money. They get maybe like five people coming in a night. And this mad scientist shows up, Dr. Vink. He's sort of a recurring villain in these different stories, even though they're generally not connected in any way. And he says, I can help you bring back your theater if you agree to show one of my films. And it happens to be like a silent film. And the manager's like, forget it. I'm already losing money. The scientist leaves it anyway, disappears. So the theater goes on, keep struggling, and then one night the one of the films that's playing, it, it it's destroyed mysteriously in the projector, and they're desperate to make sure that they don't the kids are desperate to make sure that there's not a refund on the money or just keeping them in the theater. So they put in the doctor's movie and it's a big smash, and they keep playing it. And but of course the movies are not just movies. There's more to them than that. And the one that they're showing is a type of Nosferatu film. And the vampire looks fantastic. I mean, I love the performance. I love the makeup job that they did on it. It's a great throwback to Max Schreck. It's a really fun little episode, and they're only like 20 minutes long. I highly recommend Are You Afraid of the Dark if you're interested in getting your kids into, scary stories. They're short, like I said, they're short. They're not too extreme, they're not gory. There's generally not any kind of death or serious violence or anything like that. They're a little low budget. They're filmed in Canada, and this was the 90s. They didn't quite have the technology that they do today, but they're a lot of fun. And there's quite a few vampire stories that are pretty good. Another good one is what is it? The Tale of the Night Shift, which has a vampire that takes up residence in a hospital, which of course is a perfect place. Um, no shortage of blood there. But of course, this vampire decides that he's gonna make victims of the staff, and one of the volunteers is starting to take notice. And I'll leave it at that. But again, the makeup in that is phenomenal, and it's very, very unique. I don't know that I've ever seen a vampire that quite looks like that, or even some of the lore is kind of interesting and doesn't feel too out of place, but a lot of fun. Highly recommend Are You Afraid of the Dark? Great for the spooky season. Um, okay. There's one Nosferatu film that I still haven't seen yet, and this one's a little, this one's different, considerably different. It's called Nosferatu in Venice, or sometimes called Vampire in Venice. It was made in the 80s, if I'm not mistaken. And it stars Klaus Kinski. He came back as the vampire, although he looks nothing like he did in the 1979 remake. He refused to put that makeup on again, so here he is with long, flowing white blonde hair, and yeah, about the only thing that he keeps is the teeth. And the movie is a mess by all accounts. The production itself was a nightmare. It took years to complete. I think a couple different directors uh, worked on the film, and before it was finally completed, and I use that term loosely. I think even Klaus Kinski directed some scenes, but I don't know that that's a movie that I will ever get around to watching. Um, Mainly because the content, it's a very highly sexualized movie, and frankly, that's not really something I'm interested in. Oop, darn it. That's not really something I'm interested in exploring. Uh, Maybe when I was not when I was not as selective in my youth about certain content, I probably would be willing to watch that, but I'm a little bit older and more responsible now. But I don't know that I'm missing anything. It's it's supposed to be a pretty bad film. So um, but I still, recommend uh, Werner Herzog's remake. The 1922 film, of course, is fantastic and very easy to find. You can literally find it on YouTube. I mean, it's public domain. So, um, okay, so let me get around to something that I wanted to share with you, my followers, my audience, whatever you want to call yourselves. So last year, I think around March or April, uh, I decided that I was going to write a Castlevania script just for fun. Um, it was I was thinking of my dissatisfaction with the Netflix series about how the characters were treated, how that the world and the lore and the themes and archetypes, how I felt like they didn't know what they were doing. They didn't know what they were making. You know, I just my perception of the Netflix series is not one that sees it as a overly faithful. I mean, beyond the names and the visual aspects of it, I don't really see much commonality with the games. So, the more I thought about it, the more I was like, you know what? Maybe I should just write a script for fun. So I did that. It took me a couple months. I would write, almost every day. And finally, I wrote a script. I finished it around September or October of last year. And it's based off of the original game with Simon. And the title of it is Castlevania: A Testament of Bloodshed. And uh, the so talking about it a little bit, the process of writing it. Um, One of the first things that I kind of struggled with was figuring out my tone. Like what kind of movie was this going to be? Because Castlevania is an homage to classic horror. So Universal films, Hammer horror films, Gothic literature, folklore, mythology, all that stuff. But the gameplay at its core is action. So I did not want to make I did not want to tell a story where I felt like the conflict between Belmont and Dracula's forces was just like a blood ballet, where everything felt effortless, where there was no real stakes, where there was no real challenge, no real threat. I didn't want it to feel like Blade, where the vampires are just kind of disposable bad guys. Like they're maybe slightly more dangerous than a regular gangster. So what I chose to do was I okay, I'll put it this way. When you play, so the part of the script that is like the game, that is the third act. The part with all the action, the part where Simon is storming the castle, making his way towards his final conflict with Dracula. That is the third act. You could say like the manual is the first act, like the story, because in the game you don't get the manual. You're not playing the story in the manual. That's just setup. That's just telling you why you're there, what your motivation is, what's happened leading up to your adventure. So I the first two acts are about establishing the threat and escalating that and putting Simon in a situation where like, okay, finally he's going to war with Dracula. And by that point you see how dangerous the vampires are, how dangerous his forces are. And so when we finally get around to him doing battle, uh, it there's a his victory is there's a payoff. It feels like it's been earned, and I think that's important. Like none of the battles that Simon ever has over the course of my script, none of them he walks away unscathed. And by the time he reaches the end of the story, he is bruised and battered. He is wounded physically, emotionally, spiritually, and uh, it feels it feels more worthwhile. Like I think it's a more satisfying ending to see him like that. Um, I think another thing that I wanted to differentiate my story from the Netflix series is the how the dialogue is. Um, my dialogue is, I guess you could say, a little bit more lofty, more something you'd see like in an epic poem or in a fairy tale, something you might see more in the novel Dracula. The Netflix series, the dialogue, you listen to it, it sounds like something out of a Deadpool movie. You know, it's very vulgar, it's very quippy, and that doesn't feel like Castlevania at all. Like when you play these games, that vibe does not come across at all. Uh, you compare that to like you listen to the dialogue in Symphony of the Night, it's nothing like the dialogue in Netflix series. To take that further, you know, if you look at, you know, the gorgeous artwork of Tom Dubois or Ayami Kojima, I don't hear those characters saying the lines that are in the Netflix series. It does not seem like those characters at all. You know, the games have sort of a earnestness about them. They have a um, kind of, like I said, like a kind of a fairy tale tone to them. And maybe that's not realistic, but these games aren't these games aren't going for realism. They're a mythology. Look at me right now. I'm literally fighting a pillar of dragon heads. That does not strike me as particularly realistic. Um, and some other, you know, other ideas that I wanted to explore in in my script was, uh, you know, the and this is going back to being kind of a tribute to Hammer horror, is exploring the relationship between um, faith and rationalism, which, excuse me, looking at that like as um, these two things are not at war, or I should say that they can be at war, but the hero is a person who successfully navigates both of those things, not falling into an extreme of one or the other. So in my script, you have you know villagers who you know immediately assume you know a superstitious explanation for why one of the characters, their daughter, is mysteriously taken ill. They're assuming vampires. And then you have the other extreme, you have Bishop Stoya, who's a high clergyman in the church, and he's basically saying, no, that's superstitious nonsense. You know, you risk excommunication if you are propagating this. We've been given minds and hearts to be rational. You know, if we don't use our discernment correctly, that leads into madness. And and then you have somewhere in between where like Simon and Father Muller, who's Father Muller basically summoned Simon because he knows that he's knowledgeable about vampires, and they basically are methodical in how they approach this. Like it's like, well, let's not jump to conclusions here. Like let's figure out if this is in fact a vampire. And then of course it is, and that leads into direct conflict with Bishop Stoya as well as Dracula. So I thought that was kind of interesting to treat the relationship between faith and science in a more nuanced, in a more uh, charitable way. The Netflix series does not offer that. Oop, don't want that. Um, you know, I mean, Warren Ellis is, I mean, I don't think it's any secret. He's a transhumanist. He has nothing nice to say about religion. Literally all the clergymen in of any importance in the Netflix series are treated as being rotten to the core, being you know, zealots, being anti-intellectuals and hypocrites. I think the one time that they have any clergyman depicted in a positive way is like a character who's not a main character, is just in the background or whatever, like, hey, me too, like joining in to help the heroes, but it's meaningless. It's just like it's the barest concession you could offer. And I think because Castlevania is operating in archetypes, where the church is the force which enlists the aid of our heroes, who are aspirational heroes. They're symbols of virtue. They are the light in the darkness. This castle is nothing but evil. They are the light that pierces that darkness. With the Castlevania, the Netflix series, you don't get that. You know, Trevor Belmont in Netflix series is not the same Trevor Belmont of the games. The Trevor Belmont of the games, literally preceding gameplay, you have him kneeling before a cross, praying before he goes on his holy mission. Netflix Castlevania would just be taking a leak beside the cross. He would not. He has no reverence, and he has no desire to or sense of duty. He just kind of he's kind of forced into it. Okay, let's look at the ending. Beautiful here. Look at that. Look at that. The heavenly light casting judgment. So this is a definitive ending for Dracula, unlike Rondo, where he escapes. So in that way, this is kind of the conclusion to that. Well, I'd like to talk more, but I think we've reached the end here. And yeah, I would, guys, if you would like to check out Castlevania: Testament of Bloodshed, please, like I said, it's the first link on Google. Give me your thoughts in the comments here. Tell me what you liked about it, or if you didn't like it, because I mean that can only help me as improve my skills as a writer. But I think you will enjoy it. And check out those Nosferatu films and the Are You Afraid of the Dark show, because it's quite fun. But I guess we'll wrap up here. Thank you so much for watching and listening to me wax poetic on Castlevania and Dracula and Nosferatu. Have a happy Halloween and take care and God bless.